She didn't suddenly become distant, more attentive, or confusing. What may have changed is that she began thinking about you more often than she ever expected. And when that happens, her behavior doesn't always become obvious. Instead, it often becomes more layered. There's a moment that many men completely overlook, a quiet shift. It doesn't usually arrive with a confession or a clear sign. Instead, it often appears through small contradictions. She may reply later than expected, but read your message almost immediately. She seems busy, yet still finds subtle ways to stay connected. She pulls back for a while, then unexpectedly leans in again. This is where many men misunderstand the situation. What looks like inconsistency may actually reflect an internal conflict. Because when a woman starts thinking about someone frequently, it doesn't always feel simple to her. It may involve more than attraction. It may involve more than curiosity. It can become a psychological pattern she never intentionally created, yet one she finds increasingly difficult to ignore. At first, it usually begins quietly. You cross her mind during random moments while she's doing something completely unrelated, spending time with friends, or trying to focus on something else. In the beginning, she may not see it as anything meaningful. She brushes it aside. But then it happens again and again until it no longer feels random and begins to feel persistent. This is where things often begin to change. Instead of moving closer in a direct and obvious way, she may become more careful, more aware, almost as if she's observing you from a distance, while also feeling emotionally drawn toward you at the same time. You're paying attention to what she does, instead of considering why she might be doing it. Her slight hesitation, her mixed signals, and her unexpected behavior may not necessarily be confusion about you. They could reflect her attempt to understand and manage the emotions she's beginning to experience. Because thinking about someone frequently can create a sense of emotional vulnerability, and for many people, emotional vulnerability doesn't immediately feel comfortable. So rather than rushing forward, she may adapt. She watches, she observes, she quietly tests the emotional space between the two of you. A subtle tension may begin to develop, one that you can sense but can't fully explain. Conversations may feel deeper, while also seeming slightly more guarded. Her tone may become softer, while her availability appears less predictable. This is often where misunderstandings begin. You might assume she's losing interest, uncertain about you, or simply inconsistent by nature. But that may not be what's actually happening. One possible explanation is that you've become mentally present in her world far more than she expected, and that can naturally influence how she responds. Because once a woman begins thinking about someone more frequently, her behavior may no longer be guided only by simple attraction. It can also reflect an effort to maintain emotional balance. She's no longer just responding to your words or actions. She's also responding to the version of you that has gradually taken shape in her own mind. That mental image, the one she keeps revisiting, reflecting on, and trying to better understand, can influence how she behaves around you in ways that don't always seem obvious. This is why she may seem different without any clear explanation, not necessarily more distant, and not necessarily closer, just different. If you don't recognize this possible shift, it's easy to misinterpret everything that follows, because what appears to be inconsistency may actually be the early stages of a deeper emotional process taking shape. What's happening beneath the surface may involve more than attraction alone. In psychology, repeated attention towards someone can become a form of cognitive preoccupation, where a person's thoughts naturally return to someone with increasing frequency. You're no longer simply someone she interacts with from time to time. You may have become someone her mind returns to without consciously planning to, and that can gradually change the way she processes everything about you. When someone begins thinking about another person more consistently, the mind doesn't simply replay past moments. It often begins assigning more meaning to them. A simple conversation may become something she reflects on later, thinking about your tone, your choice of words, or even the pauses between sentences. She may remember details you've already forgotten, not because she's trying to force herself to, but because those moments have quietly become more meaningful to her. This is where the process becomes deeper. Many people assume attraction is always shown through obvious behaviors, more messages, more attention, or more visible effort, but you're focusing on what she does instead of asking why she may be doing it. As her thoughts begin returning to you more often, she may become more emotionally engaged internally without becoming more expressive externally. She may begin asking herself quiet questions. Why does he make me feel this way? Why am I thinking about him again? What could this actually mean? Here's the part many people don't immediately recognize. The more emotionally meaningful someone becomes, the less impulsive a person may behave around them. Because when something starts carrying emotional importance, people often become more thoughtful, more observant, and more careful. Instead of expressing everything freely, they may begin filtering what they say and how they present themselves. This is why her behavior may appear more measured. She might take longer to reply, not necessarily because she doesn't care, but because she wants to respond thoughtfully. She may reread her messages before sending them. She may think more carefully about how she comes across. She may become more aware of how much she's revealing. What may actually be happening beneath the surface is a form of emotional self-regulation. She's trying to remain emotionally balanced while her feelings gradually become more significant. And that can create a very specific kind of tension. She may feel mentally drawn toward you while also wanting to maintain a sense of emotional control. As a result, she may create space, not necessarily emotional distance, but psychological space. She might not always be the one to initiate conversations, but she notices when you don't. She might not always open up first, but she listens more carefully when you do. She may appear unaffected on the outside, while your presence stays with her longer than you realize. This is where many men misunderstand the situation. They notice less visible effort and assume it means less interest. But what may actually be happening can be much more nuanced. When a woman is thinking about someone frequently, she may not be trying to increase interaction right away. Instead, she may be trying to understand the effect that person is having on her. Emotional patterns often lead people to search for meaning, especially when those feelings become stronger over time. Until she gains a clearer understanding of what you truly mean to her, she may not fully express everything she's feeling. So instead of moving forward with complete certainty, she may remain in an in-between stage, observing, feeling, and reflecting. And the longer that process continues, the more her inner world may gradually begin organizing itself around your presence in subtle and quiet ways. Ways that aren't always obvious, but that may appear in the pauses, the timing, and the way she remains emotionally present, even when she isn't expressing everything openly. This isn't necessarily inconsistency. It may simply be her mind trying to catch up with emotions that have grown more quickly than she expected. And without understanding that possibility, it's easy to mistake emotional self-control for disinterest, when in many situations, the reality may be far more complex. As this process continues, her behavior may begin forming subtle patterns. They aren't usually obvious, but they can become consistent enough that if you pay close attention, you may notice something changing beneath the surface. When a woman is thinking about someone frequently, those thoughts don't always remain only in her mind. Over time, they can quietly influence the way she shows up whenever she's around that person, not in loud or dramatic ways, but in ways that feel intentional without any clear explanation. This is where subtle patterns may begin to appear. You might notice that she seems to be present at similar moments more often, not because she's following a schedule, but because circumstances naturally bring your paths together. She may check her messages around the same time you do. She may become active online when you are. She may join conversations that include you in ways that seem coincidental, yet happen often enough to catch your attention. This is where many men misunderstand what they're seeing. It's easy to assume it's nothing more than coincidence. But another possibility is that her attention has gradually started giving you greater priority. As people think about someone more frequently, their focus can naturally shift toward that person, even without making a conscious decision to do so. Then there's the way she remembers things. Small details you mentioned only once may come back later, not in a forced or rehearsed way, but naturally woven into conversation, as though they quietly stayed with her. She may remember your preferences, your opinions, or even subtle changes in your tone. You're paying attention to what she does, instead of asking why she might be doing it. She may not simply be remembering information. She may be holding on to small pieces that help her better understand who you are. When someone occupies your thoughts consistently, the mind often gathers little details to create a clearer picture of that person and the role they may play in your life. Another pattern may appear in her emotional responses. They can become slightly stronger while remaining carefully controlled. If you become a little less available, she may notice it more than she shows. If you give her attention, it may carry more emotional weight than her outward reaction suggests. Even if she appears calm, her emotional sensitivity toward you may increase, while the way she expresses it becomes more measured. That contrast can sometimes reveal growing emotional investment alongside a desire to maintain emotional balance. So instead of reacting openly, she may adjust in subtle ways. She might tease you a little more, but with a warmth that wasn't as noticeable before. She may challenge your ideas without creating emotional distance. She may briefly step back, only to return in a way that feels more intentional than before. This push and pull isn't always a game. In many cases, it can be part of an internal process of finding emotional balance. She may be trying to discover a place where she can stay connected without feeling as though she's losing her sense of stability. Then, there's one of the most overlooked patterns: silence. Not complete absence, but intentional quiet. Moments where she doesn't reach out, not necessarily because she's disconnected, but because she's reflecting. She steps back internally to better understand why your presence is affecting her the way it is. This is where many men make a mistake. They notice the silence and immediately assume it means she's losing interest. But that may not always be the case. When someone thinks about another person frequently, quiet moments can become opportunities for deeper reflection rather than emotional distance. She may replay previous conversations. She may imagine different possibilities. She may reflect on her own reactions. And through that process, you can gradually become more established in her inner world, not simply as someone she talks to, but as someone who is becoming increasingly meaningful. These patterns don't announce themselves loudly. They reveal themselves quietly. If you're looking only for obvious signs, you'll probably miss them. But once you understand these possibilities, you begin recognizing the consistency behind what once felt confusing, because these behaviors don't always happen randomly. They can reflect a mind gradually organizing its attention around someone while still trying to understand why. This is the stage where many men unintentionally get things wrong, not because they lack intelligence, but because they're viewing her behavior through the wrong perspective. They see hesitation and assume uncertainty. They see silence and assume distance. They see self-control and assume a lack of interest. But you're focusing on what she does instead of considering why she might be doing it. That misunderstanding can quietly change your own behavior in ways that affect the connection. When you misread her internal process, you may begin reacting externally. You start chasing clarity. You push for consistency. You try to figure everything out by increasing pressure. Without realizing it, you may interrupt something that was naturally unfolding. What may actually be happening beneath the surface is that she's trying to maintain emotional balance while her thoughts about you become more frequent, more automatic, and more personally significant. But if she begins feeling that certainty is being expected from her too soon, she may become more cautious. Not necessarily because her feelings aren't real, but because she may feel pressured before she's fully understood them herself. When people feel closely observed while they're still processing their emotions, they often protect that inner space by becoming more reserved. This is where the dynamic can begin to shift in ways many men don't expect. Instead of moving closer, she may become more careful, more neutral, and more selective with her energy. Not because her feelings have disappeared, but because she may no longer feel comfortable exploring them openly under pressure. This is where many people make a critical mistake. You try to move things forward at the exact moment she needs space to understand what's already happening within her. By doing so, you may unintentionally interrupt her natural emotional rhythm, because attraction that develops in the mind rarely grows under pressure. It often grows through space, subtle moments, and quiet opportunities where she can think about you without feeling pushed to define the connection before she's ready. This is a perspective many men overlook. You don't always need to increase the intensity when she may already be thinking about you frequently. You don't always need to seek more attention when her attention may already be returning to you naturally. You don't need to force a connection when that connection may already be developing internally. What often helps most is patience and restraint, because when a woman is becoming emotionally and mentally invested, one of the strongest positions you can hold is not constant pursuit, but calm presence, a steady, grounded, emotionally balanced presence. You respond without chasing. You engage without overwhelming. You remain consistent without becoming demanding. And that can create something meaningful. It gives her inner world the space to develop without unnecessary interference. It allows her to move from simply thinking about you to gradually understanding what you may come to mean in her life. Until she reaches that understanding on her own, trying to force clarity from the outside may feel premature or uncomfortable. This is where your greatest influence often exists, not in trying to control her behavior, but in learning to manage your own reactions. Once you stop reacting only to surface-level signals and begin considering the deeper possibilities behind them, your own behavior naturally becomes calmer, more intentional, and more emotionally balanced. That, in turn, may influence how she experiences you. You're no longer just someone she occasionally thinks about. You may become someone she feels comfortable and emotionally safe reflecting on. And for many relationships, that's where meaningful change can begin. At this stage, everything may become quieter, not necessarily because the feelings are fading, but because they may be settling into something more stable and genuine. When a woman has been thinking about someone consistently for some time, an important internal shift can sometimes take place. The questions begin slowing down, the constant overanalyzing starts fading. What gradually replaces it is clarity, not dramatic or highly emotional clarity, but a calm understanding of how that person makes her feel. This is often the point where many men notice a change, but misunderstand it once again. Her behavior doesn't suddenly become intense or dramatic. Instead, it may become more consistent. There's often less emotional pushing and pulling, less hesitation, less overthinking, and a greater sense of quiet presence. She may no longer feel the same need to test the connection because she's been processing it internally. She may no longer create as much distance because her emotions feel more manageable and less overwhelming. What may be happening beneath the surface is a growing sense of emotional alignment. Her thoughts, her feelings, and her behavior gradually begin moving in the same direction. And when that happens, interactions often become much simpler and more natural. She may show up more comfortably. She may respond without overthinking every message or every word. She may allow conversations and shared moments to unfold more naturally, instead of trying to control every interaction. But here's an important point. This stage is more likely to happen when the earlier stages haven't been disrupted, when she has been given the space to reflect, when she hasn't felt pressured to define feelings she was still trying to understand, when the connection has been allowed to develop at its own pace without unnecessary pressure. Because when someone reaches clarity on their own, it often feels more genuine and more certain. That certainty doesn't usually appear through dramatic gestures. Instead, it often reveals itself in small, grounded actions. In choosing to stay rather than withdraw. In engaging with greater ease. In bringing a steadier, more consistent energy into the connection. You're paying attention to what she does instead of asking why she may be doing it. She may not be acting differently because something suddenly changed overnight. She may simply have gained a clearer understanding of feelings that had been developing over time. And that understanding can naturally reduce uncertainty and confusion. This is where things often become clearer if you're paying close attention. The woman who once appeared inconsistent may become noticeably more consistent. The one who once held back may begin opening up more naturally. The one who once created space may now maintain the connection, not because she was persuaded or pressured, but because that's the choice she arrived at herself. And a choice made freely is often stronger and more lasting than one created through pressure or control. So if you ever find yourself in that uncertain phase again, where her behavior feels mixed and her presence seems unpredictable, try not to rush into labeling it. Look a little deeper. Sometimes what appears to be distance may simply reflect an internal process that's still unfolding. When you understand that possibility, you stop reacting impulsively to confusion and begin recognizing patterns with greater patience. You stop chasing immediate certainty and allow clarity to develop naturally. Because if a woman is thinking about you frequently, the process may already be unfolding in its own time. Your role isn't necessarily to speed it up. Your role is simply to avoid disrupting it. And if this perspective gave you a new way of looking at relationships, subscribe for more insights into psychology, communication, and emotional dynamics. Because real connection is rarely built through pressure. More often, it develops through patience, consistency, and mutual understanding. The strongest relationships usually aren't created by trying to force certainty. They grow naturally as two people gain a clearer understanding of themselves and each other over time. When you stop trying to control every outcome, you also stop reacting to every small change in behavior. Instead, you begin noticing the bigger picture. You become less focused on isolated moments and more aware of long-term patterns. That shift alone can change the way you experience relationships. Many people spend so much time searching for obvious signs that they overlook the quiet ones. Yet it's often the subtle changes that reveal the most. A little more comfort, a little more openness, a little more consistency. These are the kinds of shifts that usually develop gradually rather than all at once. This doesn't mean every situation will lead to a relationship. Human emotions are complex, and every person is different. Some connections grow stronger over time, while others naturally fade. What matters most is understanding the process rather than trying to force a particular outcome. The healthiest approach is to create an environment where both people feel comfortable expressing themselves at their own pace. That means listening more than assuming, observing more than reacting, and allowing trust to develop naturally, instead of demanding immediate certainty. When you learn to recognize the difference between genuine emotional processing and simple disinterest, your responses become calmer and more intentional. You stop chasing reassurance. You stop overanalyzing every message, every pause, and every interaction. Instead, you focus on showing up with confidence, emotional maturity, and consistency. Ironically, this is often when relationships become easier, not because you've discovered a secret technique, but because you've stopped trying to control what can't be controlled. You understand that meaningful connection isn't built through urgency. It's built through trust, respect, and time. The more emotionally grounded you become, the less likely you are to be thrown off by mixed signals or temporary uncertainty. You begin responding with patience instead of fear, with confidence instead of insecurity. And those qualities often create a healthier dynamic, regardless of the outcome. Remember, every person processes emotions differently. Some people move quickly. Others need more time. Neither approach is automatically right or wrong. What matters is allowing room for honest communication and mutual respect. If someone is genuinely interested in building a connection with you, that interest will usually become clearer over time through consistent actions rather than isolated moments. And if it doesn't, you'll still have protected your own peace by responding with patience instead of pressure. So the next time you find yourself wondering what someone's behavior means, resist the urge to jump to conclusions. Pay attention to consistent patterns rather than single events. Stay grounded. Stay patient. Let clarity emerge naturally instead of trying to force it. Because the strongest connections aren't created by chasing certainty. They're built through understanding, emotional balance, and allowing relationships to develop at a pace that feels genuine for both people. If you found this perspective valuable and want more psychology-based insights into relationships, emotional intelligence, and human behavior, subscribe and join us for future videos. There's always more to discover when you learn to understand the mind with curiosity, patience, and balance.